have a practice or are you running a business? Valuation is the ultimate KPI.
Hey there, it's Mike Langford. Welcome to another episode of the Modern Financial Advisor podcast, brought to you by Trulytics by Envestnet. This week on the show, I have more returning guests. Brian Natal and Rick Wilkins from Elevate CPA Group are back for a fascinating conversation that fits right into a trend that seems to be a frequent topic as of late. The team at Elevate is rolling out a new tax prep as a service solution for the clients of independent financial advisors and RIAs. It's a really interesting concept that has the potential to open up a whole suite of new opportunities for serving your clients. And as a bonus, it might just lead to an expanded share of wallet as well. The rise of new value-add solutions for advisors is a really exciting trend, and it's one that I think will continue for years to come. Now, before we dive in, please make sure you subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Amazon, the YouTubes, or wherever you like to get your podcast jam on. And if you have a question or a suggestion for a guest or a topic for the show, hit us up. Simply go to Trulytics.com and use that little contact form there, or shoot us an email, podcast@Trulytics.com. We would love to hear from you. Okay, let's get to the conversation with the gents from Elevate CPA Group. Well, Rick Wilkins, Brian Natal, wonderful to see you. Welcome back to the Modern Financial Advisor podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Mike. It's good. Great to be back.
I know. And, I'd be remiss if I didn't say this. Well, happy holidays to you, number one. It is a happy Thanksgiving Eve. We're recording this the day before Thanksgiving. People won't hear this the day before Thanksgiving, but I feel like you have to say it.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving to you.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Sure.
Exactly. And by the way, we are all making a trip to Chicago right after this podcast because Rick is making crab cakes and they sound delicious. So I can't wait to try these things.
And you could get your tickets through Ticketmaster to get them, right? It's a quick, easy solution. Yeah, exactly.
Well, fantastic. So I got to tell you, I am incredibly happy that you and your team reached out to talk about the things we're going to be talking about today, because the timing of it is absolutely perfect. Last week, I had Laura Gregg from FlexShares ETFs on the show. She came back on the show. She's been on before to talk about the findings of their new survey, on the scalability of financial advisory businesses. And a big component of that study was looking at how advisors are leveraging outsourcing and other technologies and so forth. And I thought, look, we should dive into this with you too, because you're about to launch some new services to make it easier for advisors to scale their businesses and be more effective and offer more services. So let's dive in. How are you expanding your services, and what's the driving force behind it?
Well, I'll start off, Brian. We as Elevate CPA Group, we do the fractional CFO services and tax prep and planning for the companies themselves, for the RIAs. And we were hearing for a number of months, probably a year, of, hey, you guys need to help us out to help with preparing 1040s for our clients. And, we're like, it's not really what we want to get into. That's really not what we, was where we're going with this. And we kept hearing it over and over, and we kept discussing, how can we do this? People want it. How can we do it? So we've gone through that model, and now we are certainly starting that process of working with RIAs, working with their 1040 clients, working directly with the IRAs and the 1040 clients as well. And we're excited to get it kicked off.
So it's so interesting about this. Let's talk about some of the benefits of this for the advisor, right, and for their clients, because the old saying, "Death and taxes." Everybody's going to die someday, and everybody's going to have to pay their taxes. But I also think about it as everyone has to file their taxes and prepare their taxes. And as a business owner, that's kind of a pain in the butt for me. But most advisors are primarily focused on investing, right? So their business model is, managing investment assets. That's kind of how they get paid, either via, an AUM model or maybe some sort of flat fee type of thing. Some of them are including financial planning in there. But I guess the bulk of their being, if you will, as a professional is focused on the future, right? I remember back in my college days, what's the difference between accounting and what's the difference in finance? And finance is future, and accounting is, point in time or behind us, right? What happened type of stuff. So how does an advisor and their clients benefit from taking an active role in tax prep? Because I got to imagine most advisors are like, tax prep, that's not my wheelhouse.
And I think what's driving it is a few things. Is the market for finding a tax preparer is incredibly difficult. It's a profession where it's hard to hire. It's hard to find, whether it be CPAs or tax preparers, willing to take on clients. So the market's really shrinking on a supply side where the demand continues. So I think, what's driving a lot of this is the RIA is seeing a need here for their clients. Their clients are frustrated. They can't get this service. The RIAs often have all the info. They're often doing, the bulk of the tax planning anyways, which, yes, there's at times some pretty complicated strategies, but for most people, they're doing the work on that already. And so bringing in tax service really is that value add to the client in something that is a competitive advantage in getting and maintaining clients. And we've talked to RAs who have lost clients to other competing firms because they offer tax prep or lost leads. So it's kind of coming from those two areas, is both a need, wanting to service their client, wanting to keep their clients sticky, which is huge, and then also gaining new business. And it's not, although I think taxes are sexy, most people don't. I do think it's a real pain point for clients and value add that if the RIA can take off their plate, it's huge, and it just helps kind of keep that client with the RIA.
I'm getting you a T-shirt that says "Taxes are sexy."
I have
I just
one.
want to have you wear. Do you really have that T-shirt,
Mike?
Why is he not wearing that shirt on the show?
I
almost did. You know how I roll. I would have thought that was amazing. It would have been great. But what's interesting to me? The first thing that jumped out to me when we started talking about this, and I started thinking about it more, was the notion of a single point of contact, if you will, right? A single person to talk to. As an example, I spent a lot of time in the fintech startup world, right? A lot of the clients we work with and a lot of the people I kind of mingle with are in that space. And there's this thing called single sign-on, right? When you think about working on an advisor's desktop, right? If you're going into any type of big company, they want single sign-on. They do not want to have all these different logins and all that type of stuff. And there's a couple of reasons. It's for security, but it's also for super duper ease of use, right? Like, hey, because I don't have to juggle all these different passwords and what have you. This different identity. I kind of think of that on the human level too, though, right? If I have an advisor, he or she is my most trusted person. First of all, they're managing my assets, my money that I've accumulated after all this time. So I really trust this person, and they're helping me plan for the future, whether it's retirement or college planning or estate or whatever it is that I want to accomplish in life. So, I imagine that's going to be a big driver, right? Like you in the Elevate team are thinking, hey, the advisor's got the best relationship with the client. We want to make sure we work with them. Is that kind of the notion or what you're hearing?
Yeah, I think I do think it's the single point, and I do think it's from technology also, right? That oftentimes our current clients, they have a login with their RIA. They have a login with us. Sometimes they send stuff to the RIA, think they're sending it to us or vice versa. So I do think keeping that one point makes a lot of sense. I also think there's a lot of opportunity for planning, a December meeting, a November meeting to talk about year-end planning, and then a, February or March meeting where you can really go over the tax return, or maybe it's April. And with the person you trust, with the person who knows your goals, not with, I hate to say it, but a lot of us CPAs are backwards looking.
Yeah.
And so, by the time we're looking, it's like, well, withhold more this year or something. That's,
right.
That's what we're telling you. where I think the advisors really have that proactive view. And when they are given all the information, given the tax return, and can direct the engagement with the client, it really becomes powerful for them.
And Rick, one of the other things I might imagine that the advisor likes about this, but also I guess is beneficial for the client, is having more transparency into the financial life of your client is always a good thing. And I know there's probably some clients who are like, yeah, but if let you see where more of my assets, I might have to pay more of a fee, right? Because you're going to want to manage my assets if it's an AUM model. But I always think that the better the picture you have of your client, the better you can serve them. And is that the type of feedback you're getting from advisors as well?
Definitely. The more information with anything, right? The more information you have, the better. And having the RIA, kind of direct the process, we're finding that the communication is definitely more open than dealing with us directly. Because sometimes that falls into I don't want to your point, I don't want to tell my accountant this because it might generate some issue, some tax issue if they're trying to not pick something up or whatever it might be. But having that one directive from the RIA it's critical. They know what's going on. They're more involved, even in the simple things of, hey, you know what? They know the client might have bought a house and moved somewhere, right? Where we wouldn't know that maybe. They'll know where to get the 1099s. They know where to get all the information, and they can get it for us, because the client, the last thing they want to do is sit there on a Sunday in February or March, spending their time pulling these documents together. Right? It's a pain point that's really hard for them to get over, and having an RIA kind of quarterback that has been helping quite a bit.
That's actually a really good point that I didn't even think about it as much. I mean, Brian, you talked about having these conversations in November or December, but I think any person, probably including the RIAs listening and executives at wealth management firms that subscribe to this show or listening, go like, April 15th or April 14th is a stressful day. I'm pulling all my crap together, trying to get this thing filed. I'm working overtime, trying to make sure I pay as little taxes as possible without having somebody knock on my door telling me that I'm getting audited. So, I'm sure that everybody goes through that, or lots of folks go through that. And one of the things that I think an advisor, or people think of their advisor for, is a sleep at night factor, right? That you help me feel more comfortable and confident in what's going to happen in my future, right? You protect me against myself, right? Because if you manage your own money, chances are you're going to make some mistakes there. An advisor's there, a steady hand at the wheel. I think this is no different, right? Like, bring your advisor in and have them involved, at least in the tax process.
Right. Yeah. Like I said, the more involved they are with us and with the client, it's just a better product at the end of the day, a better service.
Mm. So let's talk about the process a little bit, because this is absolutely fascinating, and I'm just wondering how it starts, right? Like, so as an advisor, am I now hanging out a shingle saying, hey, we also do tax prep? Has this been a thing that's just been, I think, super in demand from clients and advisors getting asked all the time? Or what does the process look like for the advisor-client relationship when it relates to this type of a service, but also in working with Elevate CPA to get this done?
So what we view it as is a team to get this done. And so, yes, for the RIA, it will be their product. They're going to be, white labeling this, although they will get a tax return signed by a CPA, quality reviewed, prepared, and stood behind. But it's really that teamwork, right? That we want to leverage the RIA's relationship with the client to get the tax info, make sure we have all the big major events that's happened in somebody's life accounted for, get a good delivery experience along with a conversation with the client, get planning in there so the RA has they have the tax returns then. They're seeing what's going into it. They're seeing the final product really for planning. From our side, we get that info securely from the RIA, we have some processes that can turn it around in a relatively quick time compared to many CPAs.
Yeah.
We help them manage the document request process to send reminders, make sure clients are really aware of deadlines, both for actual deadlines like April 15th and the deadlines we have to have information to be able to file by that time.
Mm.
But really managing that team together so that the product that goes to the final client is from the RA, but is really well done by a team of people. And so, the process, we do everything on kind of flat pricing. So, unlike a lot of tax preparers, CPAs, there's not going to be unknown bills coming here. Based on the level of complexity, we have 4 levels. We have a price for each level. They fall in there. That's the price it's going to be. We prepare the return. We get it out to them, and hopefully for the RIA, then it becomes a nice add-on product that they can either pass the cost through to their client, they can increase their fees. We even have heard some RIAs say they want to just eat the fee, which we don't love that idea, but I understand it for some of them.
It's really fascinating, and I like the notion that is a flat fee, because if you think about the advisor who's running a business and they're serving the clients, having to now I've got this new service that I'm not 100% in control over. I am outsourcing it, white labeling it. Having that be a variable fee could be problematic, right? Because now you have to think about which clients do I offer this to? Let this conversation about it. Now the conversation becomes relatively easy, and it's X dollars. This is what, either we subsidize it, or it's just, like you said, some of them eat it, but most of them pass it on to the client. Okay, fine. They wanted to mark it up. I'm sure they could do that as well. But it's just nice to have a number that's easy to use and deliver that concept. And then you can really just put it in front of the client. And we are kind of moving into, this is actually gaining a lot of steam in the advisory space, flat fee engagements, right? Where they're like, hey, we're going to charge you per account or per relationship or whatever it is. There are some advisors who are moving away from AUM, and they're doing financial planning fees plus asset management flat fee. So this kind of fits right within that model.
Yeah, and it is frustrating when you 2 returns that look identical. One can take 4 hours, one can take 2, and nobody can tell you why. It's just the human process of it all.
Yeah.
So it's on us to be efficient for sure. Right. And again, I think just having that certainty, having really good communication. I think what we hear quite a bit is there's local preparers and returns fall through the cracks, where they don't even get filed, or at the last minute they're the preparer's calling, asking a bunch of questions, or the client doesn't know what to expect in timing. Part of our process is very well spelled out deadlines, timing, process, where it's at.
Yeah.
We're not going to let things slip through the cracks. And what we tell people, and I know this sounds a little boastful, but we're not going to do this if we can't do it well and make the RAs look right, because then it just doesn't work. If it doesn't make the RAs look really good and be a valuable service to their client, then we're all wasting our time at it.
Right.
And so
we're more the back office, right?
Right. Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense. Well, it is, look, there's lots of other services that are doing that for the advisor, right? There, many advisors aren't financial planners. They're using financial planners, or they have an estate attorney that they work with. And the whole goal is like, hey, listen, we're going to help you build a better relationship with your client. So that's hugely powerful. I wonder, so we're talking about tax return preparing type stuff. I'm sure that's a technical term, tax preparing type stuff. But
tax return preparing.
Yeah. But I imagine this leads to or opens up a lot of opportunities for tax strategy as well. Does this service include any type of feedback loop to the advisor to give that to the client as well? Or is it just, hey, here's the tax return, it's all good to go? What other information is coming back through the advisor's lens?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think our key here is, in order to make this scalable and something that can, a local CPA might be able to handle 20 or 30 of your clients. We're looking at hundreds.
Yeah.
So we aren't going to have direct contact with your client because then it's just not doable.
Right.
Although we will have the ability through some, we're a Slack channel or a Slack program to ask us questions both specific to the client or just in general. And by using that, it takes it out of the email realm, which, we all know we get a ton of emails and it's hard to respond to them all. So it's a little more searchable. It's a different method, which makes it easier to track. And really our goal is to be able to provide both general advice and, answer those client specific questions. Of course, if it gets to a level of complexity where it's not a, I won't say simple, but more straightforward answer,
sure,
it would come with an additional fee. But a lot of the things are relatively simple. Can I deduct, XYZ? Well, that's probably one we can say yes or no, and here's why.
Right.
And then it's in there, it's searchable,
Yeah, a lot of the questions are repetitive when you get to that certain number, right? So the answers are very similar.
Yeah.
And I think we also are looking, although we don't have it right now, but as this matures, is education, as new laws come out, putting out info on that, writing more detailed responses, things like that.
Well, let's jump into that education concept, because I want to learn a little bit more about that too, because, well, I think it's safe to say that the majority of financial advisors are not all that knowledgeable about taxes. We certainly know that, the overwhelming majority don't have a CPA, right? I'm sure there's a few, but very few are also CPAs. So they're not likely super comfortable with the notion of talking to their clients about tax stuff, like other than things like tax loss harvesting and, oh, by the way, the tax benefits of, deferred contribution plans and a Roth versus a traditional or whatever. So they got those things handled for the most part. But, during our prep call, you mentioned that your team are working on specific programs for educating advisors so that they could be better prepared to have conversations with their clients. Let's talk a little bit about those. You mentioned that some of them might be programmatic, actually coming through, electronic delivery type of stuff. What's the whole education system look like, I guess, for this process?
I guess I would first say what you mentioned is probably the bulk of the planning opportunities for most individuals. So although I would say I agree when you get into the nitty-gritty of tax, I think RAs are really good at the things that matter for most people. Okay. There's just not, if I'm a W-2 worker, there's just not a lot out there but those items you mentioned. Yeah. If I'm a retiree, it's, timing of distributions. Do I do a qualified charitable distribution? There's just not a ton, right? And it's those things that the RAs are dealing with. That said, I do think kind of that program, those topics, you could see some like stock options or investment interest. When is that deductible? Why? What should we be looking for? But really doing it from the viewpoint of the advisor. I think the frustrating thing about taxes is if you go even on expensive research sites or Google it, you get the same stuff over and over. And it just doesn't ever quite hit the mark. And I think, our goal is to bring that down to a level that works for the RA so that they're getting those specific answers. They can ask those follow-up questions of, I'm not understanding this. Help me get there type thing. I don't know, Rick, any other thoughts on that?
No, I think, like I said, even earlier, right? It's the whole team effort, and the more we can bring, to those specifics, we certainly can. I mean, somebody may want a 1031 exchange. How does that work? And they could talk about it, and it may not be something they see every day. So there's going to be avenues, for that. And I think on that Slack or whatever, wherever the channel is going to be set up, some of those topics would be in there as well and accessible for someone to pull out and say, read it through, and there certainly will be some follow up to it, but at least it gets them in the right spot and the right questions.
So it's funny you mentioned the 1031 exchange, which is primarily real estate related, right? Or is it always real estate related?
It is now always.
It is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Like I'm familiar with it from the real estate investing perspective, but that is an area that basically most financial advisors don't ever talk about, right? Just because like, look, I don't make any money off of it. Like I am licensed to offer financial advice, investment advice on marketable securities, stocks, bonds, and mutual funds primarily, and some alts, right? But that's their wheelhouse, right? And the financial advisors in the independent broker dealer world, same thing. They're still selling stocks, bonds, mutual funds, maybe some annuities or whatever if they've got their insurance license type stuff going on there. But that's their world. And so oftentimes when I talk to RIAs and I talk to them about like, have you ever considered talking to your clients about startup investing, whether, getting into angel investing or being in a VC fund or real estate investing or whatever, most of them are like, they kind of shy away from that. But it sounds like, and hopefully I'm not overreaching here with the promise of this type of solution, because I know you're very much in the early days of this, but this could open up a whole new world for advisors, right? Of being able to evolve a CPA firm, start doing some planning and saying, hey, listen, you've got a bunch of money. One thought process might be to protect you from paying super high taxes would be to start investing in some real estate. So you have some, depreciation that you can take to defer some of your, to offset some of your earned income. And then that could be a better tax situation for you in the future. That's likely not a conversation that many advisors are having. Are you thinking that might be in the future for this type of program?
I do. I mean, if you take even the 1031 example, even if a client calls me and I know a lot, we know a lot of the ins and outs of it, it's really not that technical, the big questions, well, why are you getting out of the real estate? Do you want to get into something else? You can avoid this tax if you want to. There's other products, right? Like an UPREIT or a Delaware trust you can 1031 into that could be an asset that gets under the RIA. So sometimes it's putting those options out, not having all the specific answers to it, right? You should be considering a 1031. Does it fit that you want to stay in real estate? And that's a great conversation for an RIA. What's the pros and cons of the real estate versus the stock, the equity market for you? And so we do see that as something. And then I think where we could come in is, okay, client wants to do it. What's our next step? Well, go find a qualified intermediary and get the process going. And here's the things you need to know.
Well, that might be something really interesting for you guys, right? As look, this is the first foray into this. We're doing tax prep. That's the basic bailiwick and service offering that we have here for you right now. But as the service matures, now there could become other, as you said, either flat fee or they could be, variable fee scenarios where like, okay, I got a client who wants to evaluate some real estate investing. Can we throw that over to your over the wall to you to kind of go through some numbers and so forth? And it's what would that do to their tax situation? It's pretty fascinating to think about. Now, one thing that jumps out to me, Rick, is that I like to think about the persona of this because, when I talk to advisors, I try to think about like, what's their niche? So they have a persona for their clients. And here I imagine there's a persona for clients for the advisors that this is more suited for. So I imagine most high net worth and ultra high net worth clients are already working with their own CPA firm or what have you. So is it safe to assume that this service is primarily designed for the mass affluent segment, those who make really good money? They're more complicated than a quick TurboTax. So they start to talk about using a CPA, or who is this for?
That's where we're thinking that market is, right, for this, at least the ones we've seen. It's in that, 85% of the population, 90% of the population type folks, right? A W-2, a couple 1099s, probably from their advisor, maybe a K-1, but not really anybody with like a truly high net worth, because they're working with someone then at that point, right? And as far as for the pricing of the returns, that's a totally different model, for those. So I think it covers would cover quite a few of the RIA type clients that they have, which is what we've seen so far.
So I guess it begs the question. The follow-up question is, how does an advisor help a client recognize that they're probably inching into the territory where they might want to have a professional doing their tax prep? Like, what I'm saying? Like, hey, you're getting
ask them on that Sunday afternoon at 5:00 when they've been through TurboTax on their own for 6 hours and they can't find documents and where things go.
How much of a pain in the butt was that? Okay. Yeah. Right. So let me ask you something. How much stress were you under? How much did you eat and or drink on April 14th?
Right. No, it is. It is relatively, simple like that, because, there's that time piece to it. Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, I could learn how to change the transmission in my car if I wanted to spend the time and, look through that stuff, but I'm not going to do that. Yeah. So there is that time factor and the time savings factor that certainly has its play with that.
I always say about this type of stuff is like, as I evaluate, should I do it myself or have somebody else do it? It's usually like, time. Obviously, how much time is this going to take? And am I willing to invest that much time? But then I also think about, what are the consequences of screwing it up? Like, what if Mike Langford completely drops the ball on doing this thing? Well, in the case of your taxes, you're paid way too much and you didn't even realize you're paid way too much. Right. You could have saved a whole bunch of money that you could put to work investing for the future. Or again, you risk an audit, somebody knocking on the door saying, guess what? Shyster, we're coming to get you. It's like,
there are definitely
the interesting
those
part.
risks.
I mean, do-it-yourselfers are going to be do-it-yourselfers.
Yeah.
Yeah, do-it-yourselfers are going to be do-it-yourselfers no matter what. They're going to view it as, not worth it.
Yeah.
I will tell you, I think the returns we're looking at, even when we get, accountants out of school or a year into their career and we give them those returns, they don't get them perfect coming out. It always takes another set of eyes. And so when you ask a lay person to use a program and get it perfect, and I promise you our tax programs are better than TurboTax.
Really? What?
They're not going to. Some years they might, but I just from experience, we know it is a lot more complicated than people think.
Yeah. Well, I got to tell you guys, I really, really love this solution because as I was mentioning at the top of the show, not just the conversation I had with Laura Gregg there and the scalability survey that they just did, but I'm seeing this conversation more and more and more, where advisors need to expand their services. The more they need to service their clients better, right? Like the days of, hey, you just manage somebody's assets seem to be behind us. Clients are looking for more because they can have a robo-advisor just manage their assets, right? And do a pretty decent job of it. So now clients need more. But advisors don't have, again, CPA skills, right? Many of them are not CFPs. They're not certified financial planners. So they really don't have the financial planning skills. They don't have estate planning skills and so forth. So this is a really good thing for the RIA and independent financial advisor community. I'm sure people are going to want to learn more. They're going to want to like, hey, let me check this thing out. Is this program live and ready to rock and roll and accept advisors into the program? How can advisors get involved and start doing this?
Well, we do have our this test run that we're doing, the subscription for the 2022 tax season is full. Mm-hmm. But the full rollout for the remaining would be April 2023 is when we're looking now. We're going to market that in addition, and want to get through this first first season with this process and test it out. We're fairly 100% certain that it's going to work based on all the discussion. We're accountants, right? You got to go, you look at what can go wrong first, and then you say what can go right. So we've got everything covered, I think. So I think we will be ready for April 2023 to get it rolled out for the post beta testing.
And
Fantastic.
I think for the RIAs, think about as you're going through busy season, or our busy season, not your busy season, but how many times are you getting that April 14th call or email from a tax advisor? How many times, are you looking at the return or wondering why they missed this? This isn't right.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you can kind of look and go, man, this is something we could do and capture all this.
And also, if you have clients who routinely ask for an extension every year, talk to them. Say, hey, we'll get you in here. We get this done early.
Yeah. Well, and I do think we wonder a little bit if, to your point of if I have assets other places, if I see how easy it is that I don't even have to touch it when the RIA has the info, do I think, geez, why am I keeping this separate account? It's just a pain in my ass.
Well, it's kind of going back to what we were talking about before. There's a reason why they have an advisor, right? They don't want to screw things up. They also probably don't have the time to dedicate to this type of thing, or they want to make sure they protect themselves from themselves, right? Or as I said a long time ago, I had a client who called me a marital compromise with him and his wife, right? And it kind of was a funny one to think about, but this is true. It's like there's not just usually one person that's being, so it's a multi-personality thing there. So if you can take some stress, some time off that person's plate and help them sleep at night a little bit better, it's an awesome, awesome service as an advisor. Well, gents, this has been fantastic. I'm looking forward to crab cakes tomorrow with Rick.
They're on the way.
I'll meet you there, Mike.
Yeah. It's going to be great.
I'll get them there quickly. I won't even refrigerate them. Don't worry about it. Just go at
unrefrigerated crab meat. What could possibly go wrong?
That's right. That's right.
Well, thanks, gents. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks, Mike.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much for listening to and or watching this episode of the Modern Financial Advisor podcast. It's always fantastic to have you with us. Huge thanks to Brian Natal and Rick Wilkins for coming back on the show to explore this exciting new solutions concept. As you heard Laura Gregg from FlexShares ETFs explain on last week's episode, this outsourcing trend isn't reserved to the services advisors already provide. It's opening up a whole new universe as well. So it's really, really cool stuff. All right. As I mentioned at the top of the show, please make sure you subscribe to the podcast on your preferred platform if you haven't done so already, and give the episode a share on LinkedIn, Twitter, or wherever you're finding this thing. I mean, chances are, if you found this episode interesting, your network will as well, okay? All right, that's all I have for you today. As always, be nice to each other, and we'll see you next time on the Modern Financial Advisor podcast. See ya. Bye.